Welcome back to another episode of Knowledge Bomb. In this week's episode, we're going to talk about the missing link in mobility. I'm pretty sure that most of you understand the benefits of mobility, stretching, things like that. Foam rolling even. This has been ingrained in a training culture for quite some time now. And it's a really, really healthy thing to do in order to prevent injuries, stay mobile, stay flexible, and even improve performance over a long period of time. However, I think the big missing piece that we often overlook is moving through big ranges of motion, right? So we typically focus on local muscle structure or joint structure and improving the range of motion there. And then all of a sudden we jump to training, right? Split jerks, pressing, squatting, things like this. And there's a giant piece in between that is really the bridge between really, really well executed movement in terms of performance and this idea of improving a range of motion. And so if you think about the way we're built physically and then also neurologically. Our brain has a lot to do with how we move, our contractions, even neurological strength, right? That's why you can have really small guys who are freakishly strong. A lot of that is just this signal that comes from our brain to our muscles, tendons, things like that. And that's what essentially we're creating force out of. So that same signal defines our pattern in which we move through, and actually in a way creates a functional range of motion. So we could actually work on the local muscle structures, the joint structures, and improve the very specifics of the muscles, fibers themselves, but our brain might be signaling the same way, right? So in fact, if we've increased a range of motion in a local muscle or a local joint, it doesn't mean that we're going to be able to use it in that full range of motion just purely because our brain is going to say, nope, like we move this way, we've moved this way for 20 years, and this is what we're going to keep doing. If you think about challenging the way you move, moving through full ranges of motion is going to be one of the biggest benefits in actually putting that extra mobility to use. And so when I talk about this bridge, that's a perfect example. So a great way to start implementing your movement is in your warm-up. You can take 10-15 minutes. You can start on a bike, you can start breathing, and then you could go into a flow session using animal walks, for example. This is extremely beneficial for older athletes. And I'm talking biologically, but I'm also talking training history, right? If you have 20 years of developing a pattern in a certain way, it's going to take a lot to change that, and mobility is not going to be enough, right? You need to repattern those signals coming from the brain to allow you to move in greater ranges of motion. And so even with older athletes, you masters athletes out there, if you've noticed that it's really hard to make big changes in terms of mobility, 40, 50, 60 years old, you have a lot of life that has set up the way you move, set up your body and the way it's built for a very, very long time. And mobility is not going to be enough. I would argue that the older you are, the more beneficial movement in your training is going to be in creating extra ranges of motion. Sport is getting a lot more demanding in general. If you think about the demands of the sport, right now, its capacity a little bit, mindset is probably at the top of the list, but I'd say movement quality is a close second, right? If you don't move well, if you're not moving efficiently, you are way, way behind your potential and the competition field. So this week, take 5 minutes, go ahead and look at Ido Portal. He's kind of the, I don't want to say the grandfather of animal movements, but he started quite some time ago. Ever since then, a lot has kind of come out as resources. You can look at gymnastics bodies, check out Dr. Spina's FRC. Animal Flow is a great one. If you haven't listened to Mike Caju's podcast with Mike Finch, great one to listen to. But do some research. Spend 5-10 minutes this week. Figure out some things that look interesting, that are challenging, and go ahead and put them in your warm-up. The biggest takeaway on this is when you start to complete and when you start to do these movements, It's not for time. They need to be really, really slow, and you need to almost think about what you're doing in a very, very specific sense, right? You're not gonna feel like you're moving well. You're not gonna feel as if you have the mobility. By doing these every day, you're gonna make slow changes, but it needs to be thoughtful, focused work. So take the time, it'll pay off.